Good afternoon, good evening, students. I hope you're doing good. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to carry on with linguistics for first year students. Last time we have spoken about the language in general. We have spoken about linguistics, language versus a language, and also the origins of language. That was quite very important. Now we move to another lecture that is about, as you can see, animal communication versus human communication. We are going to make a comparison between the two, and of course, we are going to do our best in order to distinguish between the two and try to spot the main differences and the main similarities, if it is found, of course. Before I start, please leave a like on the Facebook page of this channel in order to be notified whenever I post something new, and also subscribe if it's not done. That would encourage me to do more, and also to be notified whenever I post something new as well. If you are looking for other videos concerning civilization or literature, you can find them on this channel. You just have to go to videos, playlists, and you will find them organized as well. You will find civilization British, both British and American, and also literature, both British and American. Now we start with the our lecture. Before I start with animal communication, let's just start with a small definition of this communication. Animal communication, some define it as a process of sending communicative signals from animals, or from one animal to another, or a group of animals to another group. It is not necessary to have only one animal trying to communicate, but you can have a group trying to communicate with another group or with another animal. The sender targets a specific receiver, which means if a dog is trying to communicate, it would target another dog and not a cat. A dog cannot communicate with a cat. This is universal, and you have to know that. Now, with that being said, we will move to how do animals communicate, way of communication. We have approximately four ways of communication for animals. We have acoustic signals, visual signals, chemical signals, and electrical signals. For the acoustic signals, I explained, they are verbal, which means they can be heard. For example, birds communicate between each other through verbal signals. Perhaps tweeting. Only other birds can understand that kind of communication. Dogs as well. Dogs communicate between each other through barking. Cats as well, horses as well, and wolves. Wolves usually they howl in order to communicate with other wolves of the pack, for example. And we have visual signals. This is quite important, like bees. Bees do not have to communicate through verbal signals. All they had to do is to do some specific gestures in order to send messages or signals to another group of bees, for example. And we have chemical signals. Chemical signals such as ants, they release a chemical substance on the ground, for example, and another group of ants would, let's say, recognize that chemical substance, and they would react to the message or to the signal. And finally, we have electrical signals, which are mainly used by aquatic animals. For example, dolphins or whales, they communicate through electrical signals. I hope this is clear for now, because obviously it is easy to understand this stuff. Now we move to the characteristics of animal communication. We should start with the purpose. The purpose the purpose of the animal communication is either for food, warning in case of a danger, and mating. And the second characteristic is we define it for being limited, which means it is not productive. I exemplify. If we take a dog of 1760, for example, that dog would communicate with other dogs in the same way that a dog of 2019, which means this kind of communication, or the communication for animals, does not change. It does not improve, right? And it is also instinctive. I mean, dogs are born with the capacity of communicating They did not have to learn communication, but they knew already how to communicate. This is instinctive. And we move to the fourth characteristic, which is specific species. Like I said before, dogs can only communicate with other dogs. A dog can never communicate with a whale, for example. Or the fifth, I think it's the fifth, it's the fifth characteristic. It is stimulus dependent. A stimulus, it's like you're giving a reason. This is a stimulus. When we say dependent, it means the animal depend on that stimulus. I exemplify to understand. You have a dog, for example, a pet, a cat, or a dog. So this dog, whenever it is hungry, it has to communicate with its owner in order to get food, which means the stimulus is hunger. Whenever there is hunger, the dog has to respond by communicating, will have a certain communication between the dog and its owner. For example, the dog barks whenever it is hungry, so the owner gives it food. This is about stimulus dependent. Stimulus is hunger. Dependent is the fact that the dog has to communicate to get food from its owner. Even outside, whenever they are strayed, they have to communicate whenever they are hungry in order to get food, either with other animals or strangers. Anyways, this is the characteristics of the animal communication. Now we move to the human communication. The first characteristic, which is the most important one, according to me, it is productivity and creativity. This is very important. You see, productivity, humans create new words and new expressions. I mean, they describe new objects and new situations. For example, internet or mobile. Internet, if you go back to the 1700s, the word did not exist, so humans created the word in order to describe a new invention. Even children, for example, children create their own language to communicate with their parents, for example. And the most important thing about creativity is the fact that we have such limited number of sounds. We humans can produce unlimited number of sentences. This feature cannot be found in the animal communication, of course. This is the first characteristic. The second characteristic is stimulus free. Remember, the animal communication, we have stimulus dependent, which means whenever there is a stimulus, the dog has to communicate, or the animal in general. The animal has to communicate. But for humans, whenever there is a stimulus, a human being can choose not to communicate. I give a very easy example in order to understand. For example, as a human being, a person is hungry, right? So this person, for example, he's sitting with a group of friends. So this person is hungry. He can or they can decide not to tell the others that I am hungry. There is a stimulus, I am hungry, but I don't say it. I just keep it to myself. When I go home, I can eat and satisfy the hunger. This is the difference. Animals, when there is a stimulus, they have to communicate. Otherwise, they're not animals. But whenever we're talking about humans, whenever there is a stimulus, we can choose not to communicate. This is the second characteristic. The third characteristic is context dependent. Alright, this is quite important. Humans produce language according to the context, which means they communicate according to the context or the situation, which means when and where, for example. We do not use the same language in a party or in a funeral. You cannot act happy in a funeral, so you are dependent to the context. You are obliged to the context. You are linked to the context. So this is the third characteristic. Like I said, the best example that you can give is the party and the funeral. We use different language. Now, another characteristic, the fourth one, that is quite important, is called displacement, right? Which means when, where we communicate, for example. Humans can indicate time. They can talk about past, present, or future. But the animals cannot do that. The animal, let's say reasoning, or the animal communication is limited to here and now. Unlike humans, humans can refer to past and future, and even present, right? This placement or this characteristic permits humans to talk about different things and different places as well. A dog, for example, cannot communicate the fact that he was or it was in the garden, right? But a human being can talk about something that has happened to them a long time ago, 10 years, 15 years ago, right? This is called displacement. Another characteristic, which is called cultural transmission. You remember when we talked about the animal communication, we said that it is instinctive, which means they were born knowing how to communicate. Humans are not like that. Humans acquire language in a culture with other speakers, and they do not get the language from parental genes. Humans are born with a predisposition to acquire language. Right? However, humans are not born with the ability to speak a specific language. For example, you have a baby who's just born. That baby cannot speak English directly, but that baby, with time, he has the capacity, or he is able, or he can learn how to speak a language. But babies or humans are not born knowing how to speak a specific language. This is why we call it the cultural transmission. We transmit the language or the way of communication from a generation to another in the society through culture. This is how we learn a language. We are not born with a language. And then we have arbitrariness. Arbitrariness is quite important in terms of characteristics of human language. Well, arbitrariness means that, or it means the fact that there is no natural relationship between a word and the meaning it describes, which means the meaning is arbitrary. For example, we have the word pen, right? If we call the object pen, it's not because the object makes the noise of pen. Just like we said before, onomatopoeic words. Onomatopoeic words, just to refresh your memory, they are words that describe the sound they make. For example, we have the word knock. Knock describes exactly knocking on the door. These are called onomatopoeic words. But not all words are onomatopoeic, because some objects are noiseless, just like the pen. So we say the word pen is a result of a convention. For example, as linguists, we decide to call, a TV, for example, we decide to call it a book. If we all agree, from now on, the TV is called a book. This is arbitrariness. There is no relationship between the word and the thing it describes. I hope it is clear for now. And the last characteristic, double articulation, or what we call duality. So human language is organized at two levels. The first level is physical, at which we can produce, for example, endless sounds, but they are meaningless units. At another level, meaning is produced through the combination of different sounds, of course. I hope this is clear for today. If you have any kind of question concerning linguistics, because I know that sometimes it is a little bit confusing, feel free to ask questions in the comments below or contact me in the Facebook page of this channel. I hope it is clear. I'm sorry. I hope it is clear. And yeah, so I tell you, see you in the next video. Peace.
go.